The Legend of the Stone of Creation. A family legend about a relic and a spiritual test. Deep in the old destinies and forgotten alleys of the ancient Ukrainian city of Kharkov, there once lived a Jewish family whose memory stubbornly resisted time. The legend of this family began on a troubled evening when the skies seemed to breathe ash and fear, and the streets were filled with anxious whispers. In the beginning of all beginnings, when there was no sky, no earth, no time, no boundaries, only a great emptiness spread out silently and endlessly. But then, says an ancient legend, God took a stone, not a simple one, but one saturated with the entire plan of the future world, and threw it into the void. The stone flew, tearing through the darkness, and when it hit the abyss, beyond the eye and spirit, dust, sparks of light and flashes of matter began to gather around it. This is how our planet Earth arose, as clothing and a home for the precious stone of the universe. On top of this stone, among the hills and valleys, the Jerusalem temple was eventually built. It was here, according to legend, that the paths of all peoples crossed, destinies converged, secrets were born, and the earth itself breathed the spirit of eternity. The stone became the axis of the world, its heart and the beginning of the beginning. But when the stone struck the void, fragments flew off it, tiny particles of great power and memory. These fragments scattered across the face of the earth, were lost in the dust of centuries, hid in the depths of the mountains, settled at the bottom of rivers. People found them where they did not expect, in the desert and forest, in the ruins of ancient cities, at the crossroads of fate. When such a fragment caught the eye, it was recognized immediately by the mysterious signs on the cut of the stone. These fragments began to be called the Jewish stone. Inside it, if cut or polished, letters of the Holy Hebrew alphabet appeared, and sometimes whole words were formed, as if the universe itself was whispering its first main song to man. These signs became a prophecy, a reminder and a blessing, and sometimes a warning. They say that one of these fragments was inserted into the ring of the forefather Benjamin. The stone gave its owner foresight and strength, protected from troubles and opened hearts. With this ring, Benjamin walked through the valleys of fear and the heights of joy, but he never forgot that all strength is only the breath of that original stone, in whose heart the word of the Creator hid. Time passed, eras replaced each other, but fragments of the stone of the universe are still found by people. They are sought by collectors, scientists, and simple wanderers, searching for meaning and light. And every time the Jewish stone appears in his hands, a person feels. Before him is a particle of a great mystery, which reflects the beginning and the end, the memory of ancestors and the hope of future generations. Thus continues the eternal history of the stone, the one from which all things began, and which hides in itself not only letters, but also the soul of the world. Legend has it that once, during troubled years and bloody wars, when nations clashed for the right to live under the sun, Benjamin found himself in the very center of the fight. An enemy arrow whistled over the battlefield, aiming straight at Benjamin's heart. But as soon as the point touched the ring, the stone burst into white flame, and the arrow, as if it had hit an invisible wall, shattered into pieces, and the stone itself was knocked out of its setting and disappeared in the dust of battle. The ring saved Benjamin's life, but lost its preciousness, leaving behind only a slight trace of warmth on his finger. The years passed, generations changed, and the story of the miraculous ring turned into a family tale, whispered on long winter evenings. But the ancient stone was not lost forever. Fate once again wove it into the fabric of world events. Centuries passed, and the time of the Crusades came. One young Templar knight named Godefroy, wandering through the lands of the Holy Land, once discovered a tiny stone, opalescent in the sun, among the ruins of an old city. The stone beckoned and disturbed. It seemed that the very memory of ancient times was pulsating inside it. The Templar did not know that he was holding in his hands the very fragment that once belonged to the forefather Benjamin. Godefroy felt that the stone was not simple. Strange dreams came with it, in which he heard the voices of people long gone, saw vague images of battles and the world. In battle, the stone gave courage, and sometimes it seemed as if the enemy's weapon refused to harm its owner. But along with the gifts, the stone also carried a burden. Godefroy increasingly thought about the meaning of strength, about the price of choosing between mercy and fury. Soon, rumors of a miraculous artifact began to spread among the brothers. One night, following an inner call, Godefroy left the camp to hide the stone in a place known only to a few initiates. Before parting, he wrote a parchment with a story he heard in one of his dreams, about the forefather Benjamin, the ring, and the great responsibility that no one who touches the relic will escape. Thus was born another chapter of the centuries-old saga, the retelling of which is preserved in the book, The Jewish Stone. This stone, filled with the breath of antiquity, continues its journey through the centuries, becoming a test for everyone who thirsts for true strength. For many generations in our family, the story of the mysterious Jewish stone has been passed down from mouth to mouth, a relic found in distant lands and given to one of our ancestors. The fate of this stone is inextricably linked with the name of Godefroy, a man with a difficult past and an open heart. They say that one day in the very heart of Jerusalem, among the narrow alleys intertwined with the smells of incense and the sounds of foreign languages, a stranger in an old cloak approached Godefroy. His eyes shone with a special fire, and his voice trembled from the importance of the moment. In the palm of the stranger lay a stone smooth, with a green shimmer of the depths, covered with mysterious writings, the purpose of which few could decipher. "This stone belongs to the Benjamin family," said the stranger, "and contains the power inherited from the forefathers. Take care of it until the time of the great test comes. You must find the descendants of this tribe and give them what belongs to them." Godefroy accepted the gift, not knowing its full weight, but at first glance he understood, this was not just a treasure. At night, when the camp of his companions fell asleep, he woke up from a strange, almost tangible call. His heart beat anxiously, and Godefroy, without thinking, left the tent. The moonlight fell on the ground in silvery paths, and the darkness of the forest seemed alive. He walked, guided by an inner voice, until he reached a land where the roots of old trees twisted the earth into complex patterns. The Jewish shtetl languished in the damp midnight air when Godefroy, tightly wrapped in his cloak, carefully descended into the labyrinth of narrow streets. His steps echoed under the old trees, where time seemed powerless against the memory of the ancient stone slabs lying between the trees. In his hands he clutched a small bag. It contained a relic that fate had entrusted to him through pain, loss, and revelation. At the gates of the old synagogue loomed a silhouette, a gray-haired rabbi in a shabby frock coat, whose eyes did not fade even in the semi-darkness and whose face reflected the eternal fatigue of the keeper of ancient secrets. Godefroy stopped opposite, lowered his head, and, at a loss for words, only clutched the bag tighter. At that moment, the silence was more meaningful to both of them than 1,000 spoken sentences. Godefroy hesitated, then handed the relic to the rabbi. Their fingers touched for a moment, and Godefroy, without looking the old man in the eye, silently expressed his gratitude and asked for forgiveness, for the mistakes of the past, for the unconscious offenses, for the burden he carried to these walls. The rabbi, without saying a word, nodded, accepting the gift that was as heavy for him as it was significant. However, before leaving the stone, Godefroy carefully pulled an old parchment from his belt and, having lit a candle, bent over it. His hand, trembling with excitement, wrote out the lines, a story that appeared in a dream and forever changed his view of his own fate. Godefroy, having written down the dream, put the parchment in a bag next to the stone and handed it to the rabbi. The elder carefully accepted the gift and slowly, as if reading not with his eyes but with his heart, ran his fingers over the rough surface of the parchment. "You have seen more than has been revealed to you," he said quietly. "Sometimes dreams are the memory of those who came before us. Sometimes they are a sign of what will be." Godefroy nodded, feeling an unknown burden lift from his shoulders. He understood that having completed the path of the relic, he had found not only forgiveness, but also a new thread connecting him with the history of a foreign but wonderfully native people. In that dream, Godefroy saw distant times, found himself in an ancient land, where the sands of time carried away the whispers of ancestors, and the stars looked down from the sky like fiery eyes. The young warrior Benjamin, the forefather of a glorious tribe, stood on the dawn border between the desert and the holy city, clutching the ring in his hand. The ring held a shining stone, the same one that lay in Godefroy's palm. The ring was not just a decoration, it was a sign of the covenant between the people of Israel and the higher power. Before the battle, Benjamin knelt and offered a prayer for peace and the preservation of the family. The stone on the ring flashed with a blue light, and at that moment Benjamin felt as if eternity itself leaned towards his ear, promising protection and wisdom to those who would keep the covenant purely and selflessly. The night passed the baton to a new day, and somewhere in the distant past, young Benjamin again raised the ring to the sky, and his prayer, woven from hope, nobility, and an eternal covenant, echoed in the hearts of those who were ready to listen. That night, the rabbi of the city, gray and tired, met with my distant ancestor. In his hands was a modest bag, in which rested a stone smooth, with writing frozen in its depths. This stone did not sparkle with preciousness, But its weight was different, the weight of fate, the weight of the memory of many generations. Together with the stone, the rabbi brought a rolled parchment, thin, yellowed, written in the hand of a man called Godefroy. The rabbi hesitated, as if hesitant to break the silence that had suddenly become filled with something more than just the night. "This stone," he said, "was passed down in our synagogue from teacher to student, from heart to heart, not for power but for understanding." Godefroy, the keeper of ancient wisdom, left a warning on the parchment. Anyone who touches the relic will enter a circle of responsibility. The stone demands from a person not vanity but mercy, not the desire to rule but humility before the times. And only he who can bear the burden of memory is worthy of knowing its secret. And so the stone ended up in the hands of my ancestor. From that night on, times in the city became more turbulent. Rumors of impending disaster, of darkness and cruelty, hung in the air. Soon a pogrom broke out, and amidst screams, flames, and chaos, the synagogue burned to the ground. In that fire, the parchment burned too, the very manuscript of Godefroy, which contained words of warning, humility, and hope. But along with the gift came a great responsibility. Everyone who owned this ring became the keeper of the memory and faith of their people. The ring chose its owner not by strength or nobility, but by the purity of thoughts and readiness for self-sacrifice. In a dream, Godefroy saw how Benjamin faced difficult decisions, experienced temptation and pain, but always returned to the truth of his ancestors. On the parchment, Godefroy left a warning. Anyone who ever touches the relic will be drawn into a ring of responsibility and tested by the strength of the Spirit. The stone demands not power, but understanding, not vanity, but mercy. Only he who can bear the burden of memory is worthy of touching the ancient secret. The parchment burned. But the stone survived. It was hidden, my ancestor hid it in our house. Later the stone was placed in a silver frame. The ring with this stone was passed down in our family from generation to generation. But along with the gift came a great responsibility. Everyone who owned this ring became the keeper of the memory and faith of their people. The ring chose its owner not by strength or nobility, but by the purity of thoughts and readiness for self-sacrifice. In a dream, Godefroy saw how Benjamin faced difficult decisions, experienced temptation and pain, but always returned to the truth of his ancestors. On the parchment, Godefroy left a warning. Everyone who ever touches the relic will be drawn into a ring of responsibility and tested by the strength of the Spirit. The stone does not require power, but understanding, not vanity, but mercy. Only he who can bear the burden of memory is worthy of touching the ancient secret. Since then, the parchment was considered lost in our family, but the memory of it, of Godefroy's night and his parchment, is still alive. The parchment disappeared, lost forever, but the memory of it survived. The story was passed down in our family, about how the rabbi handed the stone to the ancestor, about the night of destruction, about the wisdom of Godefroy, whose words seemed to echo in the hearts of descendants. Each of us who held the stone in our hands felt as if we were under an invisible gaze, not strict, but demanding. The stone did not give strength, did not immediately reveal secrets, but made us think about our own actions, fears, and dignity. Becoming the keeper of this relic, a person took on the burden and light of memory, not as a burden, but as a fire that can warm souls, but also burn those who seek only glory. Since then, neither the parchment nor Godefroy's exact words have survived in our family. But every generation remembers, if the stone ever falls into the wrong hands, the test will be repeated. The wheel of responsibility knows no fatigue. Only those who can bear the memory of pain and mercy will discover the true essence of the ancient secret. And so, to this day, in the evenings, when candles are lit and stories are told, the memory of Godefroy's night lives on in our family, and of the inaccessible parchment that may one day return to the world from the ashes.